MIAA Commissioner Mike Racy joining me once again this week. Sir, it's good to have you back on.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, good to see you.
We're coming off a busy week for the MIAA Basketball Media Day. Just before we get into our other conversations, just how successful is Basketball Media Day for the league and for these teams that, come together in Kansas City at the college basketball experience?
Well, the two primary people that we do this for, and probably a better question to ask them than me, but I'll speak for them. It's our coaches and our student athletes, and I think based on conversations I had last Tuesday with both groups that they both continue to be very excited that we do this as a league and very appreciative of the work that goes into to hosting Media Day. We're fortunate in Kansas City that we get to do an event like that at the College Basketball Hall of Fame. It's a great setting. It highlights the history of college basketball, but even more important, the interactive aspect of it. A lot of things that our student athletes and coaches can be engaged in, when they're not on the podium talking to the media. So we had a great turnout, a great media presence from Kansas City and our MIAA communities, and I thought the energy was great. I think there's a lot of excitement in both men's basketball and women's basketball for nationally ranked teams and MIAA schools that are going to be in the hunt again for regional and national championships. I think Central Oklahoma last year on the men's side, Missouri Southern on the women's side, not picked at the top of the league, but certainly had great seasons. We'll have surprises like that again this year. But we're doing Media Day the same week that the Southeastern Conference and the ACC and the Big Ten Conference are doing theirs, and I would argue that where we do ours at the College Basketball Hall of Fame is better than any other venue in NCAA basketball to start the season.
All the history there too, but I have to ask you, did you play any Pop-A-Shot?
I did not. I saw Coach McCollum put a 90 score on the board, and I knew I'm not going to go near that thing. So I stayed away. I let the skilled coaches and student athletes put the marks on the board. It was a fun time though, watching the competition down there. It got pretty intense, but it was fun. Men's coaches, women's coaches. I even saw a couple of games between our communication directors and probably a few media folks that got on there as well.
Marshall challenged me too.
Yeah,
so there was.
Yeah. So I knew I was out of my league. I was a spectator, not a participant.
Basketball kind of getting rolling into their schedule here next few weeks of exhibition games in the regular season, but let's start somewhere else. Kind of an interesting topic, I think, that both of us wanted to kind of dive into today too. After kind of seeing the topics, does the fact that they're dominant Division I programs in certain sports in states where there are MIAA schools and programs help those MIAA schools, whether it's softball, volleyball, basketball? Just feels like maybe that helps a little bit too.
I think so. I mean, I think certainly the recent track record of some of the success that Nebraska Kearney has had in volleyball, that our Oklahoma schools have had in softball, certainly highlighted by last spring's national championship that Rogers State won. I think you've got to look at that, Chris. Nebraska, I think certainly is a volleyball state. I mean, I think you ask a lot of Husker fans, they probably want to say that they're still a football state.
Oh yeah.
But volleyball is king. They sell out. They sell out their arena. They're setting NCAA attendance marks. The Nebraska Cornhuskers women's volleyball team is always in the hunt for a Final Four and an NCAA championship. And I think that, that transfers to kind of the culture and the environment that exists in that state. You've got young girls all across Nebraska that want to grow up and play college basketball. That's what they see on TV. That's what people are talking about at school, and I think it does translate to kind of the culture of winning and what Nebraska Kearney has been able to do in volleyball. I looked at the rosters yesterday, Chris, knowing that we were going to talk about this. The Big Red D1 Nebraska Cornhuskers women's volleyball. Only 33% of their roster is made up of young women that played high school volleyball in Nebraska. If you look at Nebraska Kearney, 75%
Wow.
of their roster is made up of young women that played Nebraska high school volleyball. And so I think there's a correlation. And then obviously, you mentioned Oklahoma. I talked about the success our Oklahoma schools have had. I think with the state of Oklahoma and historically having the women's college softball World Series at ASA Softball Complex in Oklahoma City, the recent success that both the Sooners and then Oklahoma State Cowboys in Stillwater have had in softball. And I think in Oklahoma, you've got young women that are growing up, dreaming about someday playing college softball. And we've got great college softball in the state of Oklahoma. We've got great college softball teams in the MIAA from Oklahoma. So I think there's correlations in both of those sports in both of those states, and it's just interesting to think about that when you think about kind of pockets of success at the collegiate level. You certainly think Nebraska volleyball. You certainly think Oklahoma softball, and I think we benefit from that in the MIAA.
Obviously, some of that comes, the teams have to perform too, right? But at the same time, you see some programs that have one or two local kids, and sometimes that is to kind of get the best there is there, but also kind of keep that local interest. How big can this become? Because we've seen, like you said, Nebraska is selling out arenas in volleyball. I mean, women's sports is growing rapidly, and rightfully so too, to where more young girls are seeing these opportunities there locally that they can have a chance to go play too.
Oh, I think it's tremendous growth and tremendous potential, and I'll use as an example, Chris, a sport that we're really seeing growth in both Kansas and Missouri at the high school level, and that's in women's wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both states now offer women's wrestling state championships through their high school activities association. I know we've got MIAA institutions that are looking at adding women's wrestling as a varsity collegiate sport. It's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months. I think we'll see that those type of announcements from MIAA institutions. So certainly the growth of women's sports at the youth and high school level transfers to what we're doing at the collegiate level. And I think we've also seen, and you and I have talked about this at the in Division II with name, image, and likeness.
Yeah.
We see in the MIAA certainly, at least right now, more of our female student athletes are finding name, image, likeness opportunities. We're seeing that activity at the men's level, but women's MIAA student athletes are certainly outpacing men MIAA student athletes in those NIL opportunities.
Another topic we're going to talk about today, and it's always at the forefront of any sport, I think, is officiating, whether it's the need for more officials where we're seeing in high school, Missouri and Kansas, because you're moving football, you're moving softball, you're moving all these games around because you don't have enough, officials to work it. The pro levels, officiating is always at the front burner everything. But you and I have talked about quite a bit about officiating and instant replay and everything too. But it feels like the MIAA tries to be as transparent as you guys can with officiating when you talk about just how good they are, but also if there's a mistake, they're pretty quick to correct things too and learn from that as well.
Yeah, I think certainly we can all agree that officiating any sport is a very difficult assignment. It's and certainly at the Division II level, the Division III level, the high school level, it's not a job. These men and women are not doing it necessarily because of the pay. There's not a lot of pay. A lot of them are doing it because they're former student athletes in this sport or a similar sport, and this is their way to stay involved, to give back, to stay connected. They do make mistakes. They do make errors. We see it certainly highlighted at the NFL level, where it is a job, and with all of the training and money that they put into officiating, there's still mistakes. There's still even with sophisticated replay and all of the tools that they have, there's still the human element. There are mistakes. We try to, in the MIAA, engage, be open with our coaches, our supervisors of officials, and I think they're the best in the country. They are always available for our coaches to have conversations about calls, about plays, about what the official saw, about why he or she made the call they did. Sometimes those conversations help coaches understand that the call was right. Sometimes those conversations are our supervisors admitting that an official was out of position, or an official missed that particular assignment, or missed that call, and or made the wrong call. And we do need to be transparent. I think, Chris, in the MIAA, we've had a history of a number of officials that have come through the MIAA, and not necessarily stayed a long time, but rather used it as a transition to a Division I officiating career, or even a career in professional sports as an official. I'm very proud of that. I think there's a reputation that the MIAA has in all of our officiating programs, that we do it right, we do it well, we recruit good officials, we help train them, we help evaluate them, we help them get better. And whether they're here for a long career in officiating and working in the MIAA, or whether they're on to something else, we take great pride in really the professionalism, I think, that our MIAA officials approach this role. And whether we're talking softball or football or basketball, watch an MIAA official. If you see him or her in the parking lot, 9 times out of 10, they're in a suit and tie or a business dress to go to that game. They arrive in the parking lot ready to work. They enter the arena in a very professional way. They engage with our coaches in a professional way. They leave the court in a professional way. And whether they had a good game or a bad game, they handle that in a professional way. That's what I'm most proud about. I think all of our officials work hard on kind of the basics of being a good official. Have your mechanics down. Be in the right place at the right time. Be a good communicator. Be a good listener. Work hard in the off season. Be knowledgeable of the rules. Go to camps. Go to clinics. I think all of our officials in every sport approach this in that way, but it's really their professionalism that's really taught by our supervisors of how our officials need to act and the way they need to present themselves that I'm most proud of.
MIAA Commissioner Mike Racy with me this week, and we'll get out of here on this last topic. I'm sure we'll get some people talking too because it's a fun topic, and we've talked about football postseason before. Now we're going to jump into basketball postseason hypotheticals. Is there room for change with how Division II does the postseason men's and women's basketball tournaments at this point, or do you feel like the 8 regions are a good place where they're at?
Well, I think certainly the 8 regions have served the division well over time, Chris. But, with anything, I think there's probably room for improvement and there's probably room for innovation. I think it's a good time to talk about this. This is the week that we're starting NCAA basketball practices all across the country. The season will tip off here in a few weeks. We're proud we're helping to tip off the women's basketball season here in Kansas City at the CCA Tip-Off Classic at Municipal. And Missouri Western will be with us at that event. So a lot of great teams. But, I just think that, Chris, when we think about basketball in Division II, it is our most high-profile sport in Division II. The most schools in the division, it has the largest sponsorship rate, over 300 schools sponsoring men's and women's basketball. A primary media placement, the men's basketball championship live on CBS. Mm-hmm. Women's basketball historically has been on one of the ESPN channels for their championship. So, these are our 2 showcase events, and I think it's time to look at the structure we use for those championships and whether we can do better and whether we can provide a more enhanced student athlete tournament experience. I'm speaking here as Mike Racy, someone
Yes.
that's worked more than 25 years in Division II athletics, a long time at the NCAA, commissioner of a Division II conference for 6 years. I'm not sharing anything, Chris. It's the official position
Right.
of the MIAA. This is just my opinion, but I would suggest that instead of the current 8-team regional championship, and then those 8 winners advancing, 10 days later to an 8-team Elite 8, and having 2 weeks of NCAA D2 postseason action for men's and women's basketball, I would suggest that we scrap 8 teams and move to 4 teams, and move to a model that results in a men's Final Four and a women's Final Four. And I would advocate, again, this is Mike Racy, I would advocate that every year that men's Final Four and the women's Final Four be played at the same place, in the same venue, using the same hotels, using the same, bus route to get teams to the, everything for our men's and women's student athletes every year, that enhanced experience to be the same. And make that men's Final Four, women's Final Four weekend, whether that's in Atlanta or Indianapolis or Kansas City, make that town the destination for NCAA Division II basketball fans and Division II basketball coaches. But I think, moving to a 4-team structure instead of an 8-team structure, we would have 4-team sub-regionals. We'd have 4 of those in each region. Mm-hmm. And then the 4 sub-regional winners would move to a regional championship. And, then I think moving those regional champions onto a Final Four. I think the other thing this provides is an opportunity to expand men's and women's basketball. We've seen Division I do that. We've seen Division I move from 64 teams to 68 teams. And I would suggest that we do the same thing, Chris, that we look at, having four 16-team regionals, and that we would have a 17th team in each of those four regionals. That would be your 68 teams.
Right.
And what you would have in that those four sub-regionals in each of those four regions, you would have a play-in game at one of those sub-regionals where the 16 and 17 seeds would play each other. And then the next day they turn around with the rest of the sub-regionals. This gives more schools the opportunity to host, 4-team sub-regionals or 4-team regionals. And I think it just provides a better experience. And it also allows us to increase the bracket to 68 teams, where Division I is. And it's been a while since Division II basketball expanded, even though we've been adding teams. So, again, that's kind of that's where I'm at personally. I think 8-team regionals have served us well. I believe it's outdated. I believe that we can do better as a division. We've seen football move to a 4-region format. We've seen baseball and softball in Division II get innovative with sub-regional and regionals. And I think we can look at doing some of those same things in basketball and make our showcase event in Division II an even better event for our student athletes and coaches.
And I'll add this too, just my opinion from last year in Evansville. I mean, that was a fun week, but low key maybe a very long week at the same time, because it was every other day you had the men's games playing. You had the maybe the coaches like that too, but you're there all week. You could have both men's and women's there, but at the same time, I don't know what the attendance numbers were, but it's hard for fans to get there for an entire week if your team is there. Northwest Missouri State's the prime example of that, win national title. You may not have anybody there on a Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it is. But if you put, like you said, you put the 4 there and you have the women's there too, all together, you have a weekend of it. Maybe the numbers are better, just based on the fact that people can't get a whole week off of work to be out there.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. I mean, I've certainly focused my comments on maybe a more enhanced format or structure for our student athletes and coaches. But this may be a better format for our fans. The first week would be your sub-regional tournaments. And that could be played, except for that play-in game. You could do that on a Friday, Sunday.
Yeah.
That first week. The week 2 would be your 4 regional championships, and again, you could do that Friday, Sunday, or Thursday, Saturday for your 4 regional tournaments. And then the third week is where you would have your 2 Final Fours in the same site. And you're right; those again could happen on Thursday, Saturday, and Thursday afternoon would be the men's games. Thursday night would be the women's games. The men's championship Saturday afternoon, the women's championship late afternoon or early evening, and I think it would be a great basketball weekend in March over 3 weekends after the conference tournaments are done. And, I think it would allow Division II to maybe have an even brighter spotlight on great men's and women's basketball competition.
Absolutely, because I heard from a lot of people last year was, well, we'll go if Northwest makes it Thursday or whatever day that was, that Thursday, Friday, because, we can turn it into a weekend, but that's hard to make that a full week. But I was out there all week. I mean, that was my job. So, I had every other day to work. So I didn't have too many complaints. But, I can definitely see where that's just a long week to get fans to one place. But who knows? We'll see if anybody hears us.
Yeah, well, it's certainly something I think that, I've had a chance to visit with Andy Peterson about this, who's on the the NCAA Division II men's basketball committee. And I think there are a few people that are talking about this. I'm not the only person that thinks this way. And there are others that have similar ideas about kind of a Final Four structure and 4 regional tournaments in D2 basketball, and probably people that are a lot smarter than I am that can nail this down and figure out exactly what this needs to look like. But I think it's worth exploring. We've done a good job in Division II of being innovative, and I think this is another place that we can get a little creative and maybe do things a little better than we're doing them now.
MIAA Commissioner Mike Racy, thank you again this week for joining me, and maybe in a few weeks we'll have football postseason kind of coming into a clearer view, and then we'll have basketball and several other sports to talk about as well. Volleyball championships coming up too.
Yep. Always enjoy it, Chris. Great to see you.
Take care.